I'm Rob. Welcome to my channel. If you fear World War III or the 2030 agenda, do this now. I'm going to do a little history quick. During World War II, victory gardens, known as war gardens, planted by civilians during the war to supplement food rations and boost morale. Growing vegetables, fruits, and herbs, encouraged by our governments in the United States, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, and Germany. Over 20 million victory gardens in the U.S. were planted, producing about 40% of the nation's fresh vegetables by 1944. Even schools' gardens were created to provide fresh produce for lunch. Vegetables include tomatoes, carrots, lettuce, and cabbage. Started in 1942, campaign and promoted through the propaganda. So, if you're worried about hearing about World War III, which you know that we've always already been at war. It's been commodities and so forth and everything with the other countries. And then we've actually been in active wars um, with other countries here recently, of the U.S. Um, anyways, it doesn't matter where you're at. If you're fearing of that or the 2030 agenda, you don't want to go along with the program. You want to be self-sufficient. So I advise you to look at the hydroponics, aerial gardens, vertical gardens, or you can even grow buckets, of potatoes. Get 5-gallon buckets and grow potatoes. You can't grow a lot, but you can grow some. So if you live in the cities and you have your patios and so forth like that, you can try doing a bucket, potatoes in buckets. You got trees that you can buy that you can grow indoors, too. I was gonna say it's gonna be easy. You got to transplant and all that, but you can grow lemons in the house. You know what I mean? They do have trees like that. Just got to look into that kind of stuff. Now they also got maybe blueberries you can grow on your kitchen table. They've got plants like that. Yes, you'll have to take care of it and you have to transplant it. And then the purpose of all this is so you can get into canning, jarring, wax and eggs, wax and cheese, help preserve it. You can research and look into that. Even if you want to do like raise some rabbits or chickens and stuff like that, you need to, really do some research to look into it. You know, even like a smokehouse, when you make jerky and the curing process and all that with a smokehouse, everything takes time, and I advise you, before you start digging plant trees in your yard, you want to call, make sure it ain't fiber optics or oil or gas or whatever lines or electrical lines, running, where you're digging. So you got to call, I don't know what certain numbers you can call. I can't remember off my head, but, call them numbers, make sure before you dig. But, you're going to have to, if you try to grow apples or peaches or pears or pecans or walnuts or hazelnuts or whatever, or if you wanted to do like raspberries, blackberries, um, stuff like that. It takes time. You know, years. I mean, it takes years to learn to have a green thumb to be able to plant and take care of it and not kill it. You know, I haven't had a whole lot of luck with aloe vera plants. I've killed a few, and they're supposed to be the easiest ones. So it ain't simple as everybody thinks. But anyways, um, like I said, you need to learn now. So if you're worried about the 2030 agenda or World War III, I would advise you start this summer or start right now, this year, because spring is getting ready to break forth in several of the states and everything. And you want to start working on it, because that way you get your green thumb, the ins and outs, and not killing the plants or the trees, and then also you got to look and research because of pollination. Like I know, like they say like there's some trees that pollinate others, and some plants and this and that will pollinate each other. I don't know. I'm not an expert on all that, but I've heard of that. But I know they say at least plant like 2 apple trees or 2, oranges and pears. That way they can pollinate each other. But like I said, there is some other plants or trees that will pollinate that other tree, but you'd have to do the research on that and look into that. Like I said, but right now I'm serious. Have you ever, if you're not wanting to go with the program and you want to be self-sufficient, because you can't even trust the food supply or anything these days. Anyways, almost every day there's multiple recalls on stuff. It doesn't matter what it is. It's crazy. Anyways, so you can't even trust the structures we got. Look what happened with COVID. The shopping cart's full of toilet paper. But anyways, but like I said, it's a very important. You need to start doing it now. Not tomorrow, not next year or whatever, because 2030 is only a few years away. So, that's the facts. In World War III, we've already taken one more giant step towards that. With everything. I know it's like every year, rumors of war and all that. I understand that, but you need to really take it serious, and you really need to start working on it now. And I'm serious. Do your research, do your homework, talk to the people at the greenhouses. Talk to some experts. So, you got some family members that's farmers, and they've been, they got decades, they got years, and decades of family, growing farms. They know what they're doing. So you can even talk to the Amish, maybe, and they can help give you some advice. But like I said, you really need to start on now and learn how to not only to grow it, but to can it, jar it and all that, preserve it, wax and all that, to be self-sufficient because things are just going to get worse. I hate to say that, but it's just the way I see it and the way things are going. I don't see things getting a whole lot better. So I advise you to do it now because, like I said, it takes years for the trees to start producing fruit. It takes years for the raspberries and blackberries and stuff like that to start producing really well. It takes years, not just I plant it now and I get it, this year. No, it takes years, like 3 or 4 or 5 years down the road. So if you plant it now, you might be having produce by 2030 maybe out of the trees. And I don't know. I'm not an expert, but I just know it takes years, for that stuff to work out. So I advise you to start doing this stuff now, looking into it. You can grow vertical gardens in the house, hydroponics in the house. Like I said, you can do potatoes in a 5-gallon bucket. I mean, there's all kinds of things you can Google and look on YouTube videos of anything. Raising chickens, whatever. And man, you need to start doing it now. And I can't emphasize it any more than that. But man, that's all I got to say. Anyways, thank you for your time. Like, subscribe, share. God bless.